A good Woche and welcome to the Daily Tanya. Today is the 8th day of Adar, first Adar, and today we're going to learn the entire chapter 28. And Alter Rebbe here continues with his advice, techniques, how to be joyful, and how to overcome different challenges. Particularly, the Alter Rebbe discusses about disturbing thoughts during prayer, during Torah study, which is something that may lead a person to sadness. So we discussed in the previous chapter about disturbing thoughts, undesirable thought during work, in the middle of the day. This, the Alter Rebbe explained that there is no reason to be sad for having those thoughts and to challenge them, because on the contrary, this is something, a reason to rejoice, because this is an opportunity to perform the mitzvah and to overcome our challenges. That makes us stronger, that brings more light when we overcome a challenge every time we push away these thoughts. But when it comes, these thoughts come during prayer, you're actually in the middle of doing something positive, in the middle of focusing in concentrating in prayer, and all of a sudden those thoughts come out of nowhere. So here, there is no reason to be happy about this, really, because you're right now in the middle of doing something positive. Where do those thoughts come from? And some may think, says the Alter Rebbe, that these thoughts is proof that your prayer is not real. If you would be really praying good, sincere, from the heart, you wouldn't have such thoughts. So the Alter Rebbe says this is nonsense. On the contrary, and he explains the concept that we are really people with two souls. I mean, this is something we discussed in the past in the Tanya, and therefore we are like there is a struggle, a battle between the two souls. And if one soul, the godly soul, succeeds in taking over your thoughts and concentrating in prayer, that is a call for the other side, the evil soul, the nefesh habahama, the animal soul, tries to get up and tries to disturb you. So the Alter Rebbe basically says, in this case, there is no thing. There's nothing you need to do. All you need to do is just ignore and keep focusing on the right side. Keep focusing on the prayer, focusing on the positive things that you're doing, and just push it away. Don't deal with it. Don't handle with this. And Alter Rebbe will touch on a few more points, as we will see as we go along this year. So let's see, inside chapter 28, says the Alter Rebbe. ואפילו אם נופלים לו ירורי טייבס, ושהמחשבה זורס, בשעס העבודה, בתורה, בתפילה, בכוונה. Even if lustful imaginings or other extraneous thoughts occur to him during his service of God in Torah or in prayer with kavana, with proper intention. Says the Alter Rebbe, Al yoshis leiv aleim elo yasiach daitoi mehen kerega. It should pay them no attention, but avert his mind from them immediately. That's the only advice. Just ignore it. Keep doing what you're doing. Doing the davening, this is really a time when every time we try to pray, it's very often that the thoughts come flying in the mind. Say someone came in the middle of the prayer. After the prayer, the rabbi walks over to the guy and he says, Shalom Aleichem, welcome back. He says, welcome back from where? So he says, I saw you were davening Shemona Esrei doing the Amidah. You were flying to Australia, you were flying doing business in Dubai, and you were all over the world. So welcome back. So this is a common thing, and there is a reason for it. Because when we try to do the right thing, there's always the other side will come to battle, and we need not lose focus to realize that there is a battle here between the good side and the not good side, and the stronger you become, the other side will also rise. Will try to bring you down, and that is why, says the Alter Rebbe, we shouldn't lose focus. We just keep doing the right thing. Now here the Alter Rebbe now goes on to address another point, and that is there's a concept that is spoken about among the tzaddikim, other tzaddikim, that talk about elevating the thought of strange foreign thought, to elevate them. Now, what does that mean? There is among the tzaddikim, a tzaddik is a holy man. By them, there is certain times that can enter in their mind a thought, and that thought that enters the mind is not of their own thought. It is a thought that comes from another Jew. What does that mean? Everything in the world has godly sparks that sustains it. Even thoughts of foreign thoughts have also godly sparks. Now, those godly sparks that are in the thought, that gives the energy to the thought, is a godly spark that wants to be elevated. So the thoughts, let's say a thought of a feeling of a desire, a pleasurable desire to something which is not good, that enters a person. There is a way that Kabbalistic tzaddikim deal with it, is by elevating and changing this thought from its root, which means that when you realize where is the root of a feeling, of a desire of doing something pleasurable, it's rooted in the attribute of chesed, kindness. And a tzaddik is able to take that energy and a thought of doing something pleasurable away from doing pleasurable thing which is not kosher, to change it into doing a kosher pleasurable thing, a pleasure of godliness, pleasure in Torah. This is the idea of elevating the thought from the evil and elevating it to a positive place. Says the Alter Rebbe here, do not be a fool to think that you can do that. Why? Because that is only for tzaddikim. A tzaddik that sometimes enters his mind a thought like that, and it's not an actual thought to do something, but because another Jew feels that thought, the tzaddik sometimes has a thought entering to his mind in order to elevate the other person's thought, the energy that is in the other person. The thought is not of his own desires. A tzaddik doesn't have any bad desires, evil desires. So a tzaddik is able to do it because a tzaddik is elevated by himself. So he can elevate other people's thoughts. However, a person who has his own negative thoughts of desires and lusts, says the Alter Rebbe, you cannot pick yourself up by your hair. Paraphrasing. You cannot, if you're tied down, you cannot lift yourself up. So this is basically, it's if you're going to start dealing with this, elevating these thoughts, these foreign thoughts, thinking that you can do it, it may drag the person down, because the person is already tied with we have our weaknesses. And if we are going to deal with it, let me take my pleasure and use it for godliness, obviously you're tied with other types of pleasure, and that's going to drag you down. You cannot elevate yourself like that. So that is in a few sentences, Alter Rebbe says, do not be a fool, don't deal with this, because those are your real thoughts, your own thoughts. But nevertheless, don't let this bring you down, make you sad, on the contrary. So this is what the Rebbe is saying here now. Nor should it be foolish as to engage in sublimation of the midos, of the extraneous thought, of the character, as is known, that one can overcome extraneous thoughts by elevating their source. Says Alter Rebbe, that's not something that an average person can do. For such things were intended only for tzaddikim. Tzaddikim in whom there do not occur any evil thoughts of their own evil midas, but only from the midas of others. So that tzaddikim are able to elevate and help other people. However, but as for one, meaning a Beinoni, they have an intermediate person who is not a tzaddik, to whom there occurs an evil thoughts of his own from the evil that is lodged in the left part of his heart, the evil midas of his animal soul. How can he raise it up to the spiritual realm when he himself is bound below by his desires for the material? So if you're tied down there, you cannot elevate it. So what do? Says the Alter Rebbe, nevertheless, do not let this bring you down. You need to focus on serving Hashem, and serving Hashem with great joy, with great happiness. Says the Alter Rebbe, nevertheless, he must not be downhearted, not feel dejected and despicable because of this occurrence of extraneous thoughts during the service of Hashem, when he ought to be most joyous. Adar, on the contrary, he should draw fresh strength and intensify his determination with all his powers to pray with concentration, with even greater joy and gladness. How so? So, like we said before, Alter Rebbe says you have to realize that if a bad thought comes to you, that means that you're doing a good job. Because you're doing a good job, because you're succeeding fighting the Yetzer Hara and connecting to Hashem, that is why the Yetzer Hara rises up. He wants to fight back. In the realization that the foreign thought which occurred to him derives from the klipa of the left part of the heart, which wages war within the Beinoni against the divine soul within him. It is known that it is the way of combatants who seek to destroy one another, and similarly of wrestlers who aim merely to topple one another. Now when one is gaining the upper hand, the other likewise exerts himself with all the resources of his strength in order to prevail. And therefore, therefore, in the battle between the divine soul and the animal soul, when the divine soul exerts itself and musters all its strength in prayer, thereby to weaken or even vanquish the animal soul, the klipa of the animal soul too gathers strength to conquer it, to counter it, aiming to confuse and topple the divine soul by means of a foreign thought of its own. And continues Alter Rebbe and says, what we mentioned before, that this is a mistake what people think, that when you have foreign thoughts during prayer, that is proof that your prayer is worth nothing. Says the Alter Rebbe, that would be true if both thoughts come from the same soul, the good thought and the evil thought. Then it shows if you're busy doing good, being in prayer, how could you have other thoughts? But being that it's not one soul, there are two souls. You're praying with the godly soul. Yes, the godly soul is using the physical soul, but the other thoughts come up not from your godly soul, come from the other soul. That's what Alter Rebbe says. This refutes a common error. When a foreign thought occurs to some people during prayer, they mistakenly conclude that their prayer is worthless. For if one prayed properly and correctly, so they mistakenly believe, no foreign thought would arise in his mind. Says the Alter Rebbe, that would be true if they would have only one soul. They would be correct if there would be but one soul within the person, the same soul that prays, being also the one that thinks and ponders on the foreign thoughts. But in fact, there are two souls. Each waging war against the other in the person's mind. Each of them wishes and desires to rule and pervade the mind exclusively. All thoughts of Torah and fear of God come from the godly soul, while all thoughts of worldly matters derive from the animal soul. However, the godly soul is clothed in the animal soul, in the physical soul, to be able to think. Actually, except that the godly soul is clothed within the animal soul. Says the Alter Rebbe, you should think of this scenario, of this in this situation. You should think, if you have those evil thoughts, think about it like it's a situation of you're praying, middle of prayer, and all of a sudden some anti-Semite sees a Jew praying, wants to disturb his prayer, and is going to start talking to you just to disturb your prayer. What are you going to do? You're going to answer him? You're going to start arguing with him? There's no point. So just ignore him. Keep praying. So you realize that the evil thoughts, the strange thoughts that come to you, think of them like a strange anti-Semite who comes to disturb your prayer. So all you do is just ignore him and keep doing what you need to do. That's what Alter Rebbe says. This is, to use an example, like a person who is praying with devotion, while facing him there stands a wicked heathen who chats and speaks to him in order to confuse him. Now, we're not talking about a person who is trying to ask you a question. In that case, you answer the question, you move on. We're talking about a person who is really trying to disturb your prayer. So, surely the best advice in this case would be to answer him neither good nor evil, but rather to act as though he were deaf without hearing. And to comply with the verse, answer not a fool according to his folly, lest you become like him. So just as in the analogy of the heathen who disturbs one during prayer, so too, when foreign thoughts enter one's mind while praying, he should answer nothing at all, nor should he engage in argument against the foreign thoughts. Meaning, he should not occupy himself with mental discussion on the best strategy for countering the foreign thought. Why? For he who wrestles with a filthy person is bound to become soiled himself. You're going to wrestle with somebody dirty, even though you're going to win, but you're going to get dirty yourself also. If you're wrestling with bad thoughts in your mind and trying to contemplate how to deal with it, so naturally you're starting already thinking those thoughts. So that's why the best advice is just ignore them, push them away, move your thoughts to something else, to something positive. Instead, he should pretend not to know nor hear the foreign thoughts that occur to him, should dismiss them from his mind. And on the other end, gather strength and concentration in your prayer. And strengthen still more the power of his concentration. That's what you should do. Finally here, the Alter Rebbe says, what if you try? You try as hard as possible, but it just doesn't go away. You're not succeeding in this. Says the Alter Rebbe, final advice, if you're really trying and you cannot push them away, just humble your soul before God in your mind and ask Hashem for his help. You should do it for his sake. Beg Hashem to help you, and Hashem will help you. That's the Alter Rebbe's promise. Says the Alter Rebbe, if, however, he finds it difficult to dismiss them because they distract his mind with great intensity, Azai yashpil nafsho el Hashem v'yischanel lo yizborech v'machshavto lerachem olav berachamav amurumi. Then he should humble his soul before God and supplicate him in his thought to have compassion upon him in his abundant mercies. Like a father who takes pity on his children who stem from his brain. And so should God be compassionate on his soul, which derives from the mind of God. The attribute of Chachma is explained in chapter 2, that Hashem will help him to rescue it from turbulent waters, the thoughts which disturb his soul. This he should do for his own sake, for Hashem's sake. Why? Hashem amay mamash amay. Hashem mamash amay. For his people are a part of the Lord. In order that one should not incur divine judgment as to whether he is worthy of God's compassion, the Alter Rebbe advises that one should beseech God's mercies for his own sake. Since the soul is a part of God, in aiding the soul, he actually helps himself, so to speak. So the question of whether one is deserving of such aid thus becomes irrelevant. So this is the end of this chapter, the beautiful advice that the Alter Rebbe gives here. And tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, we're going to continue with chapter 29 with other advice that the Alter Rebbe gives in the serving of Hashem. Wishing you Shavua Tov, a good Tavach, and a happy Vach. All the best.